The first time Karen Peterson called my roof an abomination, I was kneeling in wet grass fixing a sprinkler head, and she said it like she'd been personally appointed Empress of Good Taste. She stood at my fence line in a pink tracksuit with a clipboard clutched to her chest, perfume drifting over the property stakes, talking about aesthetic integrity, like my 5 acres were some unruly province of her kingdom. Then she handed me a violation notice, $500 to start doubling every week after that. And I remember thinking, lady, you are about to find out the difference between authority and fantasy. My name's Jack Callahan. I spent 20 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, so I've got a healthy respect for weather paperwork and fools who mistake confidence for competence. After I retired, my wife Sarah and I bought 5 acres in the Texas Hill Country and built a forever home. Sarah has a chronic autoimmune condition, so every choice I made was about peace, durability, and fewer future problems. In Texas, asphalt gets cooked, hail gets mean, and wind does not care about appearances. So I chose a standing seam metal roof, galvalume, steel, hail-rated, wind-rated, energy-efficient, built to last. It wasn't trendy, but it was smart. Karen, unfortunately, was the newly elected president of the prestigious Oaks HOA next door, and she'd decided my silver roof offended the cohesive visual appeal of her subdivision. There was just one problem. My property wasn't in prestigious Oaks. Never had been. My deed was clear, my survey was clear, the county plat was clear. I wasn't under her HOA, her board, or her favorite approved shade of brown. So I emailed the board, attached my deed, my survey, and the county map, and explained they'd made a mistake. Then Karen wrote back from her personal account and admitted in writing that yes, my property was not technically inside the HOA, but because my roof was visible from their main road, the board had voted to enforce their standards on me anyway. That afternoon, I went to the county clerk's office and pulled every public document tied to prestigious Oaks. Buried in the governing documents was the sentence that mattered: their covenants applied exclusively to the property listed in Exhibit A. My land wasn't in Exhibit A. That should have ended it. Instead, the fines kept coming. 500 became 1,000, then more threats, more certified mail, more official-looking nonsense. Sarah tried not to show it, but every envelope tightened something in her face. I hadn't built our home into a sanctuary just to let some HOA tyrant turn it into a stress factory. So I started talking to the neighbors inside prestigious Oaks. That's how I met George, who got fined over a garden gnome, unapproved, whimsical statuary, which still sounds insane out loud. Then Maria, who'd been threatened over the wrong mulch. Then another family who got cited because their basketball hoop was red instead of black. Once I started listening, I realized Karen wasn't protecting property values. She was feeding an appetite. Then she escalated and threatened a lien against my property. That changed everything. A fraudulent lien is still dangerous. It stains your title, complicates your life, and costs money to fight. Karen wasn't just being petty anymore. She was trying to use the legal system like a club. I called David Chen, an old friend from my Army days, who now practices property law in Austin. Dave read the email trail, looked over the documents, and laughed the way lawyers laugh when somebody has gift-wrapped them a winning case. He said the same thing. I was thinking Karen had zero jurisdiction. Her email was a confession, and if they filed that lien, we were going on offense. He drafted a cease and desist letter that hit like a rifle shot. Statutes, evidence, bad faith, slander of title damages, legal fees, the whole works. We sent it certified to Karen and every board member. For 10 days, the mailbox went quiet. Then the anonymous complaint started. County code showed up over an illegal septic system. I handed over the permit and final approval. A building inspector came next over an unsafe structure complaint. Same result. I had every permit, every inspection, every sign-off and binders. Karen had guessed I was sloppy. She guessed wrong. When that failed, she went to gossip. Suddenly, I was the outsider trying to bankrupt the neighborhood, drive up dues, ruin property values. Friendly waves disappeared. Cars slowed at the edge of my driveway. She was trying to isolate me before anybody looked too closely at what she was actually doing. Then she filed the lien anyway. The second I held that county-stamped document, I got very calm. She had finally overreached in a way nobody could explain away. I made copies of the lien, my deed, the HOA plat, Karen's email, and Dave's letter, then invited George, Maria, and a few others over to my house. I laid everything out on the dining room table and walked them through it piece by piece. Here's my property, here's theirs, here's Karen admitting she knows I'm not in the HOA, here's the lien she filed anyway, and here's the part that hit hardest: when I sue the HOA's legal bills come out of your dues. Fear became anger. Maria slapped the table. Ben, a quiet accountant who'd been suspicious of the HOA budget for years, started asking about vendors. That question cracked the whole thing open. I checked the business registry. Prestigious Landscaping LLC, one of the HOA's biggest contractors, was tied to Karen's brother-in-law. Aesthetic Contracting. The company benefiting from all those violation-driven repairs belonged to her nephew. Suddenly, every fine, every forced correction, every vague line item had a different shape. This wasn't just about control, it was a pipeline. Karen was using the HOA to funnel work and money to her own family. That discovery turned my fight into a neighborhood rebellion. Using the HOA's own bylaws, the homeowners petitioned for a special meeting. On paper, it sounded boring. Budget review, legal expenditures, vendor contracts. In reality, it was an ambush. I stayed outside in my truck that night because I wasn't a member, but through the windows I could see Karen at the head table with her little gavel and that thin, royal smile. George stood first and calmly asked why HOA money was being spent on a lien against a non-member. Karen tried to wave it off. Then Maria and the others started handing out the folders. The room changed in real time. Heads bent down, papers flipped, faces lifted. Confusion became recognition. Recognition became rage. A man stood up asking if the landscaping owner was Karen's brother-in-law. A woman across the room demanded to know whether the contractor she'd been pushed toward was her nephew. People started shouting about rising dues, no-bid contracts, and who exactly had been getting rich off their community standards. And Karen lost it. She screamed, cracked the gavel on the table, called the homeowners ungrateful, and told them they should be thanking her. In less than a minute, she proved every ugly suspicion in the room. Ben moved for a vote of no confidence and removal of the board. George seconded it. Hands went up everywhere. Just like that, her kingdom was gone. The cleanup moved fast. By the next morning, the interim board had apologized to me, withdrawn the lien, and sent a check to cover legal expenses. George stepped into leadership, Maria and Ben joined him, and the new board hired a forensic accountant to go through years of records. Over 5 years, Karen had directed more than $150,000 in inflated no-bid business to family-connected vendors. The evidence went to the district attorney. Real charges followed. Karen eventually took a plea deal, paid restitution, and got barred from serving on any HOA board in Texas ever again. Not because I enjoy destruction for its own sake, but because there's something satisfying about watching a bully finally run into a system she can't intimidate. People like Karen survive on isolation. They count on everyone being too tired or too nervous to compare notes. The minute people do, the spell breaks. A few weeks later, Central Texas got hammered by a brutal hailstorm. The sky went green-black, the wind started howling through the oaks, and then the hail came down hard enough to sound like 1,000 hammers on the roof. Sarah and I waited it out in the living room, and when it passed, I stepped outside expecting damage. My roof was perfect. Not a dent, not a scratch. That silver metal eyesore Karen hated had just done exactly what it was designed to do. Then I looked toward prestigious oaks. Blue tarps, everywhere. Every board-approved asphalt shingle roof Karen had insisted on was torn up, cracked, shredded, leaking. The whole neighborhood looked wounded. And there I was, standing in my driveway, staring at my untouched roof and their ruined ones, realizing the universe had a crueler sense of irony than I ever could have written myself. The same people who once side-eyed my house started pulling into my driveway asking questions. George came first, then Maria, then Ben, then half the subdivision. I spent afternoons explaining steel gauge hail ratings, seam locks, and why I chose function over approval. Then the new board did the one thing Karen would have hated most. They changed the rules and made standing seam metal roofs not just allowed, but recommended. One by one, the blue tarps disappeared. Silver roofs went up. Bronze roofs, dark green roofs. The place still looked nice, maybe better than before, but now it looked like a community built by adults instead of a committee addicted to control. Karen thought appearance was power. She thought if something matched the palette, followed the script, and pleased the right people, then it must be right. But Hale doesn't care about approved colors. The law doesn't care how loudly somebody bangs a gavel. Sooner or later, reality shows up, and when it does, substance beats style every time. My real victory wasn't just that my roof survived. It was that Sarah got her peace back. It was that a whole neighborhood woke up. It was that the woman who tried to rule by fear got exposed by greed, paperwork, and a Texas storm. So let me ask you this. When somebody abuses a little power for years, Is removing them enough, or do they deserve to feel every consequence of what they caused? And have you ever dealt with an HOA, a boss or some petty tyrant who confused control with ownership? Tell me where you're watching from. Drop your story in the comments and let me know whose side you'd have been on when the blue tarp started going up.